Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. In this video we are going to talk about water, and we're going to take a look at the other water components, which are the lake and the river. Last video we actually talked about the water basics and we talked about the ocean, so there's a link in the description if you haven't watched that. But let's continue with the water stuff. But as always, before we get started, remember now you can support the channel by subscribing to my Patreon. It has some nice features for everyone that's in it, different tiers. There's that Flip Normals affiliate link that I have if you want to check that out. If you ever need some extra assets, that really helps out the channel if you buy through my link at no other cost to you. Remember to follow me on Twitter. There's the Discord. And if not, just remember to leave a like and leave a comment. That goes a long way for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe if you haven't and ring that bell for notification. Now, let's get started. So, what you see right now is a scene that is being made by some Megascan assets. The landscape is actually part of that western town that's being available for free for this month. So if you're watching this video on the month of January 2021, the western town is completely free. It has an amazing landscape material that I will be talking about very soon. Okay, so this is a very pretty scene, but I'm gonna exit out of this. So this is the whole scene that I have, and these are the two water bodies that we're gonna be talking about. We have a river over here and we have a lake over here. Now, what you're seeing here are some visual effects that are made by particles. Same thing with the water interaction down here. There's actually no water interaction that I found as of yet. The fluid sim, it's a little bit broken. So I just did that with some VFX that I found for free. So stay tuned for the rest of the video if you want to know how I did this. But let's get started with the water bodies. And for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the game view. And I'm going to get rid of these two so we can start from scratch as we always do. All right, now I've deleted the water bodies that I had, just left the VFX doing crazy stuff. And as you can see, it's just the VFX that was doing the water interaction, quote unquote, over here. We'll talk about that in a bit. But let's start with the river. Now I'm going to go here into place actors, type water, so we can see all our water bodies. And I'm going to drag a river inside here. So if you have edit layer on your landscape selected, you're going to see that the river is actually carving your terrain. If you don't see that happening, that means you don't have that selected. Make sure you have that in order to follow along with the tutorial. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to mimic what I had in the beginning. We may or may not get the same result. So for the rivers, you can see that we also have spline points like we have for the oceans. But the difference is it's not a circular spline point because it's a river. And the good part about this is you can just keep on creating spline points and make the river as long as you want to. So I'm on a spline point right now, and if I hold the key of Alt and I drag in one direction, I create another spline point. So that is one way to create a spline points on a river. You could also right click and add a spline points like you do on your ocean. And you can also move them around. You can also move them up and down and do something crazy like a river flowing upwards, which is impossible. But there you go. And there are certain parameters that you're going to see that are related to the spline points that are not related to the water body per se. But let's just build this river first. So we're going to have a nice curve over here. Then we're going to take out another spline point that goes not upwards, it goes this way. And actually we can create two more. So I'm going to put this one back and we're going to extract another spline point. I'm just holding the key of Alt so I can create instantly another spline point, and I'm just going to rotate this. These are the Bezier handles. That's how I've known them for a long time. If you've been into 3D, you probably heard about them. So I'm just going to turn them all the way around here. And there you go. So we have a nice river going through this part. So there's a couple of things that we're going to take a look at before we do our lake. Now let's go to these spline point. if you look at here, we have some water parameters that we can play with. If I were to just get out and select my water body, you're not going to see those because those are spline point dependent. So those are only parameters that you're going to find if you select the spline point. So you have the depth, very self-explanatory, river width, we have velocity, and you have audio intensity in case you're using that. So right now we're just going to look at these three. The depth is, again, how deep you want your river to be. I'm just going to type 80 so it's not super deep. And for the width, you can also type values that are not a power of 2. This makes you think that you have to type a power of 2 kind of value. It's not like that. You can type whatever number you want. I'm actually going to type 1500. And I'm going to, let's move it all the way over here. So that way we have our rocks. I'm actually going to lower this rock over here because it was kind of floating over there. And now we have our river coming through here. But as you can see, if you look at your river from the up part, you can see that it kind of shrunk down over here and it's still very wide on other parts. So that's why whenever you're creating your river, you need to make sure that it is as even as you want it to be. And you have to go through all the spline points to do that. So I'm actually going to go into this spline point right here. And we're going to do 1500 too, or we can do 16. There you go. Depth, we're going to do 85. Because this is just getting into the lake. Now over here is where we need to adjust things a little bit better. So over here, I'm actually going to do the same. Let's just do 1500, copy and paste all that through all the splines. And we'll just go here. And I think I'm gonna leave this one as it is. Yeah, because that's so far away, it's not gonna be noticed around here. Let's do this one 90, and I'm just gonna leave it at that because nobody's going to look at the other stuff. So from our water bodies, what we're gonna do is wanna get our water body lake, and we're gonna drag one over here. I'm actually going to put it outside of over here because when you drag it inside, it's actually really big. So we need to modify this a little bit in order to fit this little clearing that we had initially. Now, there are various ways that you can resize your lake. One of them is just literally using the scale tool. So I can do 0.5 and instantly it makes it a smaller lake. I'm actually going to leave this at 0.6. Another way that you could do it is just by adding spline points and shrinking it up if you wanted to. So I'm just going to add a couple of spline points over here just to make this a little bit more round because it was pretty much a triangle before. All right, so we have our little lake over here. And you can see that we don't have those parameters that we have with the river. We only had velocity. Let's see if we change velocity. That actually doesn't do much because the lake is not flowing. That velocity has to do with flow. So I'm just going to leave this as default. And what we're going to be doing here is we're going to take a look at the waves because this lake is actually acting up way too much for what we wanted it to be. So let's just bring it over. And that's another thing that you can see. If you move the main spline point, so this spline point used to be here, you're going to see that your pivot point might look a little bit offsetted. So just bear that in mind, and that is going to happen. And as you can see, our lake is carving our terrain just like everything else was doing. And there's one thing that I don't know if you've noticed it by now, but whenever I move this, you're going to see that my vegetation moves along with it. The reason for that is because I painted the foliage with the paint tool, and that paints it along the normals of the landscape. So if the landscape changes shape like it's doing right now, you're going to see that actually it goes underwater. So we're going to have to readjust the shape of this so it actually looks like it's part of our lake. Now we need a much smaller lake for that. Now we need a much smaller lake for what we're looking for. So I'm going to do 0.3. That's too small. 0.4. There you go. I think that's wide enough. And the rest we can modify it with splines. I'm actually going to go over this way. There you go. That's sort of what it was before. We can just readjust these. So I'm just going to move this spline this way. And these I'm going to leave them as they are. Let's see the spline on this side. I'm actually going to readjust that this way as well, because those plants were not underwater, at least not most of them. There you go. So these rocks were underwater. So I'm just going to make sure that they're not just floating in here, but they are where it's supposed to be. So this one's actually where I wanted it to be, which was around here. And I think I need to move my lake a little bit more this way, like that. There you go. So it's affecting a lot more of that rock. And we may need to adjust some splines over here, or just adjust our river. This is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to adjust the river, and I'm just going to rotate this spline and put it all the way over here. That way it goes right into the lake. It's not 100% what it was before, but it's pretty close. All right, so we have one nice river flowing into our lake. However, these are some very strong waves for a lake that's just having a very tranquil river and a small waterfall flowing into it. So we're going to go into the wave portion of this, which is very similar to the waves of the ocean. So I just opened it here, and let's just open everything and we can see all of the parameters. So I'm just going to put this towards the side, and that camera's a little bit too fast, so let's just go all the way down to 3. And let's stay here at surface level so we can see the reaction of it. And so you can see these waves are making too much noise. It's too high. So let's mess with the amplitude first. So the minimum amplitude, I'm actually going to turn down that one to 2 and let's see, 10. I think 10 is just fine. There's an amplitude fall off of, let's do 1. There's also the wavelength. So as you can see, we had a very big wave going around here. We actually still have that big wave moving around. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce this. So let's do 500 here, and let's do 150 here. So as you can see, that's going to make it kind of like a somewhat disturbed lake. So we can actually go smaller. So let's just go 100 and 250. And it creates this nice little lake over here that's sort of reacting to the waterfall that's falling over here. And again, you can just mess with that if you want. Right now we have the direction here of the wind is going randomly, because if not, then the waves will look weird. If we were to do something like 150 and zero this out, you know, it will look like one of those very, very weird effects. So I'm actually going to undo that. And right now it actually looks like a nice shallow lake around this region. All right, we also have the number of waves we can change. Let's go crazy. Let's do 64. That's a ton of waves, so let's do 10. So it's not that much. And again, it's something that, you know, a little bit of water that's being disturbed by it, the waterfall, but it's not completely going out of line. Now, just like water, if we, let me switch that to 4, the camera speed. So just like the ocean, if we go underneath, we have a post-processing material, and if we go up, we get out of that post-processing material. So we have those nice things. Those are standard with our water. And if I were to open the material, it's pretty much the same as the ocean. There's not much different to it. All right, now that we have our water bodies, let's talk about the other things that I have in here. So the thing that you all might be really interested in is in these VFX. So we have these nice VFX that look like the water is interacting. It's actually not. This is actually one plane, as you can see. When the water falls, you just put it whatever the waterfall is falling, or whatever the water is falling, and then you can get that effect if you put it on top and there's not that many waves. So that's one way to add into your water material. And where you can find this is actually, you can find it for free here on the learning tab. If you scroll down all the way to over here, particle effects, if you click this one, it's going to give you a little project that contains all the water materials and all the water particles that I'm using in this project. So if you want to do that, then you get this kind of like nice waterfall that I'm having over here. So you can see these are all particle effects. And if I go into my content folder and I look at the effects, I have my particles here. I have fire, snow, dust, and I have water. So I could even add a little bit of dust to this level right here. So we have various different types of waterfalls here that you can select in order to create this one right here. This one is actually super simple. That's why it doesn't look too realistic. I just added a waterfall with the waterfall mist and the mist collide, which is right here. It's actually not colliding. This is just something that I put here and here as like a stair stepping kind of deal, and that makes that impression that the water is actually going down. And this mesh right here is one of these. I think it's a large ripple mesh that you can just drag over here and drop it in there, and as you can see, it starts creating that, and it's just a mesh. Again, just like I said in CGI, sometimes it's just smoke and mirrors, but you can use this to give some nice effects to your water. Now, the other thing that you might be wondering is, how did I get this to look wet? It's actually super simple. All you have to do is grab the material, and I actually did this in another video, but I'm going to gloss over really quickly. I'll link that video in the description below if you want to look at that in depth. But the way that you do this is just by going into your asset, make sure that you have the material selected, and bring in another material, whatever material you want, and just go over here into Megascans and create a blend material. That will create a blend material that you'll be able to use with mesh painting. So if I go here into paint and I select the blue channel, which is the water channel usually, you're gonna see that I can just paint water over here, but it's not like that by default. What I did is actually went into the values over here. I go all the way down here into the water, the puddle layer, I'm sorry. And what I did is I turned opacity all the way down. That way it just adds kind of like that roughness, and it adds a little bit of normal mapping to your asset, creating that sort of wet look instead of doing the actual puddle, because if I reset it to default, it actually tries to create a puddle and it looks really bad. So let us undo that, and as you can see, I could make this whole thing wet if I wanted to. It actually looks really nice. So if I wanted to paint out that wet part, I could do so as well. And that is how I achieved that look. Very easy and simple, yet you could do with Megascans. Everything else here is just the foliage, and I added a little bit of ambient occlusion. And another thing that is usually overlooked, and I'll talk about it in another video, but it's the reflection captures. You're never going to have a convincing environment if you don't have reflection captures, even if you're using ray tracing, which I'm not using ray tracing in this video. All right, everybody, that is the end of this video. I just wanted to show a little bit more of the water content. So there's the ocean, the river, and the lake. Those are your three main water bodies that you're going to be using if you want to use Unreal Engine's water content. Before you leave, don't forget to leave a like, leave me a comment on what are the things you would like to see with this water content, what are the scenes you would like me to see built. I'm always happy to hear what the audience wants to see on the channel. So remember to subscribe if you haven't. There's the Patreon, there's the Discord, and the Twitter. And I'll see you in the next video.